Hi, and welcome to Nathan Reads the Bible. I am your host, Nathan, and today I will not be reading the Bible except for a couple of Bible verses to prove a point that I will be making later on when I am finished up giving my testimony, because that is what I'm going to do today. I have not been looking forward to doing this for a couple of reasons, mostly because I am a mystery as of right now, and I won't be anymore after this is done. But I believe that my story might be able to help reach some people who were in as darkest place, dark as the places I was, who are in places as dark as the one I was in. Go with that. Hopefully this brings some light to those who may still be running, because that's really what, if I were to title my testimony, it would be titled Running. And I'm going to just start it up. I was born in 1982. I was adopted at birth. I was adopted by two missionaries. Some of you may know my parents, Glenn and Peggy Gray. They were missionaries to Togo, West Africa when they adopted me. So that meant I got to go to Togo, West Africa at around 6 months old. I do not remember anything from Togo. I've seen a lot of the cool pictures of me running around. I've heard the stories of the way things were in Togo. It's a very, very different place. I know the hat. I also know that I spoke my first words in Togo, and my parents were afraid because I had been alive for longer than normal for a child to not, because I wasn't even making like sounds, I guess, like gaga goo goo type stuff. And finally one day my dad was looking at a dead bug on the ground, and I was either beside him or came up, and I looked at him and I said, "Is it dead?" Because apparently the first thing I wanted to say to the entire world was a question to my father about whether or not a bug was dead. I had been saving up all that time to speak my first sentence. So, just a weird, quirky story that I've heard about from over there, but everybody swears to it, so I don't know why they would lie to me. If they did, it'd be pretty jacked up, because I'm pretty proud of that story, to be honest with you. Anyways, moving on, we came back to America because after my parents had been in Togo for 15 years, I was only there for about 2 years of my life, so I got there at the very end of their time in Togo. But they had been there for 13 years previous to that, and they built a Bible school there. I'm pretty sure they had their hands in some churches being built. They were builders for God. And so, like I said, I don't remember anything from Africa besides that, like Little Antidote, which I don't remember. Okay, so we go from Africa, we come back to the States because my mother at the time came down with breast cancer. I don't know if you call it come down or was afflicted by what, she had breast cancer. And she was rushed, or she was brought back quickly from the mission field to a place, I think it was called City of Hope or something along those lines. down down in the South. It was, as far as I know, a Christian cancer hospital. It may still exist, may not. This was in, the mid to late 80s. Um, so all during that time, I do not really have little snippets of memories of living in apartments, and wherever we were. Um, like I remember like orange carpeting somewhere, stuff like that. And I think that was at somebody else's house, or maybe brown carpet. I don't know. There was very interesting color uh, carpet choices back in those days. So that's what I remember of that. But I do know that my mom was healed of her cancer. You can either call it healed or cured, whatever you want to say. I prefer to think she was healed, and honestly, the fact that she was able to make it through cancer was a miracle anyway around it, because if you think about it, this is my stance on medicine and, well, modern medicine to an extent. But if you think about it, the people who come up with the things that help cure people from diseases like cancer, I feel like they're almost given these eureka moments, or they were created because God, in my opinion, was part of us all coming into this world. So in one way or another, it's a miracle that we have the advances that we do in medical science, and the advances that we had at that point in time in medical science. And I believe one way or another, that's how my mother made it through her breast cancer diagnosis, because I think it was pretty bad. Like I remember once I do start having memories of like my mother or father saying, you're very lucky that you still have a mother. Or it might have been one of our family friends that said that, because back then we were around people a lot more. Um, the early days in the missionary, my early years, I was either very frequently, at least every Sunday, involved in church and a church setting. Most of the time it was Sunday and Wednesday. And the denomination that my parents were missionaries for, and that we mostly still attend to this day, because I still go with them to church. Or I go to churches that I want to check out that aren't Assemblies of God. They are ordained through the Assemblies of God, so it is kind of part of their job to attend Assemblies of God churches. I am a free agent, so I go wherever I feel like going. And for me, it's generally a smaller church that doesn't have a light show, and I guess some people, I'll make up a new term and call it a hole-in-the-wall church. I like hole-in-the-wall churches. I used to like hole-in-the-wall bars when I was a drinker, because they let you get away with whatever you want. I like hole-in-the-wall churches because it feels like they're still connected to something like what church was originally supposed to be, if that makes any sense to anybody out there. I think when you get to the largest size churches, of which in my town there's at least 2, maybe 3, but it's when you go to church there, it's very choreographed. The song service is a production. Everything's a production. And it feels like being on the set of a TV show, basically, in my opinion. I've never been on the set of a TV show, but that's what I feel like it would be like to be on the set of a TV show. So it's just doesn't appeal to me like a smaller church does, where you could actually like know the pastor like one-on-one. But that's just me. Everybody has their own place that makes them feel comfortable. To be perfectly honest, the most comfortable place, the place that I feel closest to God in this entire world, is on top of a mountain. I like to hike. I like to get out and get up there and feel. I don't know what that was. I think it was a firework. If not, you may have just heard the first drive-by that's ever happened by my house. I don't know. I don't know if my mic even picked that up. That was weird. There was a large bang outside. Anyways, so that's the kind of church I like, smaller churches. Going back to my story. So we were at this place called, City of Hope, Hope City, something along those lines. And my mother made it through her breast cancer. She was healed, either healed by modern medicine or healed by God directly. Made it through. We ended up staying around in America for a couple more years after that. When memories do start to form, it was probably about preschool, or when I was a September baby, so I was always right on the line of when a school season or a school year was supposed to start. Like, do you put this kid in early, or do you hold him back so he's more mature when he goes into that grade? Based on the way that I was as a child and the way that I behaved as a child, my parents held me back till I was about to turn 6 before I went to kindergarten. Because by then we had found our new mission field, and it was Belgium. And Belgium I do remember very well. Belgium was very much a modern country. I guarantee it still is very much a modern country. It's probably way more modern than maybe even where I live right now. Because that was something they really prided themselves on, like being old school yet being modern. So we lived in Belgium. My parents originally preached at a church in a small college town called Wavre in French. And we left there for my parents to both end up teaching at a Bible college there in Belgium. And that's important because it opens up the next chapter, because nothing really spectacular happens in Belgium besides, me just growing up, me being rambunctious. I was starting to kind of have a pattern of bumping up against authority. Though it wasn't looked at as problems, like troublesome at the time, but looking back on it, it seems like there was a pattern there of me bumping my head up against authority. The most important part about our time in Belgium was the fact that Belgium The thing most notable about Belgium is Brussels and its centrality to the rest of Europe. Um, it is very easy to go from Belgium to like all of Europe. So because we lived there, every time we had a family vacation or something like that, we went and traveled, and very modestly, but we went um, all over Europe and really, it was cool. Really saw a lot of stuff, and I learned a lot about history. One of the things that really stands out about Europe to me is at that point in time, because this is the late 80s, so we're only talking like 40 some years after World War II. Um, and so there's still places in Europe to this day where there's pockmarks from like main boulevards in Germany with big statues, and in the bottoms of them there's like pockmarks from like bullets hitting them from World War II, and they leave it that way on purpose because it reminds them of World War II. And so Europe as a continent is like a huge reminder to these huge, terrible wars that happened in the middle of the last century, in the beginning of the last century. And so that is one thing that sticks out about Europe. It feels like you can't go anywhere without there being an important battle that was fought there, or some atrocious thing that happened there during World War II, or whatever. Um, it's it's really crazy, and for me as a kid, it was really interesting. Um, I've always been interested by the military and militaries. I don't know why. So that was Belgium. Towards the end of our time in Belgium, um, my father or some students came to us from the Ukraine, a country that had recently gained its freedom from the USSR because the Berlin Wall came down. Communism officially called it quits in Eastern Europe, or Eastern Europe officially called communism quits. Russia as well uh, caved in. They said, we can't do this anymore. I'm not going to go into the reasons why communism fell on my testimony because I'm not trying to give a history lesson here as well, but it fell. In '89, communism in Eastern Europe and Russia did not work anymore. And so all those countries that were the makeup of the United Soviet Socialist Republics, the USSR, broke apart. And all these former countries whose economies that were tied to this behemoth of Russia now had to figure out how to create their own local economy. This was not an easy feat by any means for any of these countries. Some of them figured it out, some of them broke off sooner than others, and some of them figured it out faster than others. None of them have had the overlord of Russia like the Ukraine has. The Ukraine was a huge loss for Russia. The Ukraine is considered the breadbasket of it was the breadbasket of Russia, at least, the breadbasket of the USSR. It is a country that is heavily, heavily used for farming, agriculture, all that stuff. And I guess in the western part, eastern part, in the eastern part where they're fighting, that's where all the industrial, I guess, base of the Ukraine is. Because pretty much from what I know, all the fighting that's happening in the Ukraine is mostly if you imagine this being the Ukraine, there's this corridor like right here on the far east side of it, and that's where the majority of the fighting that's happening there right now is happening over here. The rest of the country catches bombs here and there, but it's not like that far eastern part. It's called the Donbass. And they have actually been fighting there since 2014 if you do research on it. But that's all I'm going to say about the current situation in the Ukraine. The situation when I went to the Ukraine back in 1992 was not pretty. It was not a fun place to be. Basically, it was a place that the mafia had their way with. And it taught me a really terrible lesson, because we had some missionary friends that got robbed over there because of the way we had to get our money, and while we were living on the mission field there, their banking system wasn't safe. So we had to have our money brought in by missions groups that were just coming to help us out. And that's what we relied on to get our money for several months at a time. Every, 2 or 3 months, we would have another missions group come out to help us out with what we were trying to do there, which was build a Bible college. And when I say a Bible college, I mean a place of higher learning of biblical knowledge. So a place where pastors go to attain. If you ever wonder, like, where does a pastor become a pastor? It's a Bible college. So that's really what, if somebody's building Bible colleges, it means they're trying to erect places where pastors can be made. So it's pretty important in the pipeline of Christianity, the Bible school. Just like college is pretty important in the pipeline of a professional life. So we were in the Ukraine, basically run by the mafia. It was a scary place. There was this regular occurrence that would happen while we lived there, where there would be dead bodies in the middle of the street. We would have to drive down these. One of the things that the Russians were really good at in USSR, whatever, in their really big cities, is making these huge boulevards, huge streets. I think like 10 lanes wide. I'm talking like a big street. Because there were so many people living on top of each other, they had to have, huge freeways and good metro systems. Like everywhere in Europe and in the Ukraine, they all had underground, we called them metros, but they were underground, they were subways. Every place over there has a subway. So, that's mainly the way people got around in the city, was the subway. It's much quicker and it's much easier. I mean, if you live in a major city, my guess is you probably don't drive a whole lot if you live in side the major city, because public transport actually works inside the middle of a major city. Beyond that, the Ukraine just, it broke my faith. And I know that sounds really, like, I probably did have a really weak faith back then. I was coming into being a teenager. I was, going through puberty. Stuff was happening in places, were new to me. So my focus wasn't, even though I went to church and I had a relationship with God and I prayed, I was regularly, committing sins, and I got to a point where I started thinking to myself, you keep praying for forgiveness for these things, but you're not really sorry for them. So maybe you should stop. And that was, while I was in the Ukraine. And then we were witnesses to a armed robbery of a tourist bus at a hotel we stopped at to eat in the local restaurants there. We needed to change money over to their local currency. And so most of the places that you would find a currency trader, almost any hotel, if you're ever traveling in a foreign country, almost every hotel that is used by travelers has money exchange services in it. At least the ones in the Ukraine definitely did. So we stop at this hotel so my father can run in and get his dollars changed into coupons, which was the Ukrainian money. And we're sitting out in the parking lot, and all of a sudden, these guys that seemed to be converging on this bus went from walking up to the bus to pulling out guns on the people getting off the bus. And my mom screaming, get down, everybody get down, just get down. And so, knowing that this place wasn't, we knew we were living in a dangerous place, and we knew that this mafia was nobody to play around with, so we all got on the ground. So we're sitting on the ground, wondering what is happening and what is going to happen to us. Are these people going to start going through the parking lot? I don't know. These are the thoughts that are going through my head. Are they going to start looking for people that made it, or that are alive in their cars? What are they going to do? You know what I mean? What if they don't make enough money off of the people they rob on this bus? I didn't know anything about crime. I didn't, think about time windows and stuff like that. Like, you only have so long to commit a crime before you're going to get a real serious police problem. Well, these guys didn't even have more than probably 10 minutes to do whatever they were trying to do before either security or the cops had them on the ground getting worked over. Because I couldn't stay down. I couldn't keep myself down for much long, and I peeked my head up and I saw that the situation had completely flip-flopped, and the guys who were previously holding the guns and in control, and I should have taken this as a lesson, but I didn't. I saw the people with the guns as the winner to begin with, but they were getting beat up by these little billy clubs these dudes had. It was pretty crazy to see. And then my dad comes running up from inside the hotel, and he gets in the car and he's like, man, you won't believe it. These people were so rude. They came running into the elevator and just pushed me out of the way. And these were some of the guys that escaped, actually, from these either police or security guards. They ran into the hotel and just busted, people trying to get away from crime, dude. They're on the move. And my dad just so happened to be in the way, so he didn't know that those same guys had just been out front committing an armed robbery. But that day, instead of taking a lesson that things aren't as out of control as they may seem, it was like my final straw. I started going to church mostly because I had to. My heart wasn't in it anymore. I I didn't feel like there was anything real there. So yeah, that time in the Ukraine, it seeped into my head. It made me ask the age-old question: if there is a God, why does He allow this suffering? And there's no good answer to that question. The only answer that I've ever heard is because that I've really heard that kind of makes sense to me at least, is it's because we have free will. We have the free will to be nasty criminals and treat each other like crap, but we have the free will to treat each other the right way, the way we've been guided by every single one of our religions to treat each other. It's not just Christianity that tells you to be kind to your fellow man. It's every religion on earth. Well, I don't know about all religions, but at least the ones that I've read about or studied in my world religions class in college, they didn't talk about going out and starting wars all over the place all the time. That's just all I have to say about that. So anyways, I became pretty much despondent. I had a really bad health scare at the end of our stay in the Ukraine. We were supposed to be there 4 years. We only made it a little over, or maybe 2 years. Tops before we ended up having to come home. The family was a mess, and we needed counseling. We needed help. Being the first missionaries into a newly free country from communism wasn't all that it was chalked up to be. It was really hard. But my dad was able to get a Bible college started there, and that's a pretty amazing feat in the end. So I give him credit for that. With everything else that was going on in the background, to still be able to focus and get that task done took some real heart, in my opinion. Okay, so from this point on, I start getting further and further and further from God's plan. And I am going to stop where I am right here in this episode, and I'm going to pick it right back up. So, I'm not going to close out with a prayer on this. I'm just going to say, stay tuned. Episode 2 will be up along with this one. I don't want these things to go more than a half hour long or a little over. So, just remember, coming back from the Ukraine, I'm about to live in America for a little while, or actually for the rest of my life so far. And I have basically fallen away from God. That's where we're going to put the brakes on this. Thank you for tuning in. That is episode 1 of my testimony.